It is 9 o'clock.
It's actually late.
Tuesday, April 3rd.
You're right.
And that sounds a little loud to me, so I'll turn me down just a tad. This is the Inside the Definitions talk, and my name is Clark Baker. I'm the moderator, and I'll do a little bit of panelisting. And to my right is Lanny Weaklend.
You're wrong. You do a lot of paneling.
And I guess we wanted to start with just the current state of definitions within CALLERLAB. There are handouts for this session, or a handout. I have my copy here, and I put it on the website so people can always find it. That would be my website, and I have little cards, so if you take a card, you can go to the website and find it. And at the end, I'm happy to give this talk to one person if they would like the copy. Some of the stuff we cover may be questions from you, and obviously those wouldn't be on the handout. So the current state of, and we're probably going to restrict ourselves to mainstream and plus calls unless we have to go off on other things. We've picked a bunch of calls that we can talk about where you may not know exactly what our definitions say if you haven't read them recently or something like that. But the current organizational structure of definitions kind of goes like this. There's a definitions committee. I'm the chairman of it, and its charter is to maintain the definitions of all the dance programs, including formations, styling, and timing. And those are all developed by different committees over the years, but they don't exist anymore, so it's kind of coalesced into one place. And any of the work done on definitions, for example, if it were mainstream, would be passed off to the mainstream committee for approval. And assuming it gets approved, then it gets published on the website. The mainstream definitions specifically are undergoing a complete rewrite and have been for too many years. And we're really close to publishing the beginnings of the initial work of that. And I think you'll like what you see in the new definitions. Our format is a little different. We give a little more information, and we try to answer all the questions that have been asked over the years about those definitions. The mainstream committee to support that, and Lanny is vice chairman of the mainstream committee, has an ad hoc committee. So instead of giving a definition to the mainstream committee and having all 200 or however many members there are of that have to look at it and comment on it and go around the loop, they've created a subcommittee or an ad hoc committee, and Lanny's head of that, and they review and all the calls that come to them first to save the mainstream committee from having to see all that. And then that either goes to the entire mainstream committee for approval or goes back to definitions if it needs more work. Finally, we have an applications review committee, and John Jones is the chairman, and Bill, I'm either going to say Bill Harrison or Jerry Story. Jerry Story is the vice chairman of that. And applications review will meet later today, and it's an interesting meeting to go to. And if you think of definitions as kind of creating the laws, then the applications review committee is like the judicial system where someone comes in and says, hey, this happened, is this proper or improper? And they have like 11 they'll be debating today, and you'll see the discussion on that. And there's a collection of all the rulings that Applications Review has ruled on the website, and that makes interesting reading. And I think I brought a copy here because if we get bored, then we should maybe just pick one or two of those. Things like if I just have the head step to a wave, can I call ping pong circulate from there? That's an example of the kind of question that comes before Applications Review. So I think I've summarized how the definitions come about and so forth. Do we want to dive right in, or yes?
I just want to
say a few words. Yeah.
One more thing. The committee I'm in charge of on this ad hoc committee, I have about 18 members that have volunteered their time to do this. We limit the amount of members we can have on this committee because the emails are tremendous. For every definition that Clark sends to us to look at, it's probably 300 emails come in on that one call because we want everybody to get their word out. And then I try to decipher what they're trying to say because every caller says things different. and then we need to decide if the definition meets what everybody thinks it does. It goes to the mainstream, or it goes back to Clark's definition committee. And I don't know if anybody of you realize how much work that Clark and his committee have put in on this definitions committee. It's a tremendous amount of work. This actually started about 10 years ago, I believe, was not implemented till about 4 years ago when Clark took it on. If I'm not mistaken, didn't Kip Garvey start this originally?
So the current mainstream rewrite effort, I had been chairman of a subcommittee under the Program Policy Committee, and I was collecting not emails back then, but paper mail, and especially there was a very interesting 4 or 5 page mail from ECTA, the European Callers and Teachers Association, where they had certain issues with different parts of our definitions. And I spoke to Kip and said, hey, it looks to me like instead of just going in and trying to fix every single little point, we really need to do a rewrite from scratch. And we had mentioned and talked about that, and eventually he got approval and I started on that. But it wasn't until I quit my job in about 2000 that I was really able to make a lot of progress on this. And I thought it was going to be a 1 or 2 year thing, silly me. So we got the first draft to the beginning of the first draft to the mainstream committee maybe in 2003, and mainstream approved what they got in 2004 with comments, and then it sat for a while, unfortunately, and no one knew what to do with it. And then finally last year the board said, we're going to publish what we've got so far. And even though we said that a year ago, and we've worked diligently on parts of that, we still have yet to publish even that, but I expect we'll get it done in a month or two from now.
Yeah, the first calls, like we started, I think our ad hoc committee started in January of last year. And we thought it was going to be, like Clark said, we figured a year, 2 years, this would be done. Well, we started discussing the call Star Promenade on March 30th of 06. And started the half sachet, number 14, August 16th. And we did Star Promenade and split the outside too. We got those calls finally done. Those 3 calls were done somewhere around in the end of August or early September. And those were sent to Clark. It was meant back to the main. They weren't sent to they were sent to the mainstream committee because they were okay. We got everything taken care of on those. Then we were interrupted with the 29 calls that we had approved in 2004 and 5 that at the convention, Clark decided there was some must-fix issues that were sent to him. I don't know, you had a bunch of stuff. So they sent those back to the ad hoc committee, so we interrupted right in the middle, and we sent, there were 19 issues presented to us. 12 of the issues were accepted. They involved cosmetic changes, number, grammar, etc. The remaining issues were sent back to the definition committee for review and change. And some of the issues were just squared set convention. Do is defined using another call, which is pass-through, which we haven't taught yet. When you do that if you go to the CALLERLAB teaching order, pass-through is after do. So there's little things like that were sent back. Then we started on Turn Back family and Do Paso family. And I have all the comments and everything on my computer. I have not had time to really process those yet. But I'm thinking those 2 calls are going to be sent back because we were split right down the middle on a bunch of things. That's where we are with our ad hoc committee. Now Clark wants to move on to some of the questions we have. A little thing on this, the application review committee. You can go on the internet, I believe, Clark, and pick up what the application review committee has done. Things like this is some of the questions that their committee received. Is it proper to call AC-doocy from a 3/4 tag formation? According to the definition, no, the concept is too ambiguous for the dancers should not be expected to decide who the centers are. Those in the wave have both centers and ends, therefore it's too confusing. So that's some of the questions that the application review committee studies. So if you haven't been to one of those meetings and you have a question, you can go up there, and if they have time, they'll answer your questions. Clark is on that committee also, I believe. It's interesting because I never thought of even calling some of these formations, but a lot of people do. With that, well, Clark, where do you want to go from there?
So the executive committee, which organized the convention, in the little blurb for this session had some example questions you might have. For example, how does Do Paso end? So that's a good question. How does Do Paso end? Anybody? Wow, everybody knows this. Courtesy turn was the pretty uniform response. How many people knew that it ended in a courtesy turn before they read that definition? You guys all see, that was something I didn't know. My caller who taught me had never, it was always Do Paso into more choreography. It was never simply Do Paso and then he shuts up and we courtesy turn at the end. So for people like me, that came as a surprise, but clearly a bunch of other people had seen and knew that, and that's how it got in the definition.
But why is that? Because a lot of callers do not end it with a courtesy turn. They go on to an alamandar or a left touch a quarter or something different. So a courtesy turn, I didn't realize it till about 10 years ago when I read the definition that it ended in a courtesy turn. So, because we don't use it as callers.
So do we have something else on Do Paso or a different question? Why don't you, you'll get the mic in just a moment.
Yeah, we are being recorded, so make sure you give us your name, where you're from, and your question.
Don Rouse from the Denver area. Doesn't it also say, I don't have a copy of it here with me, doesn't it also say something about or whatever the caller comes up with at the end?
Correct.
Okay.
Another comment? Question?
Yes, it says each dancer faces partner. Directed dancer does a left arm turn half to face in the opposite direction. Releasing arm holds moving forward. Each dancer goes to the corner with the right arm turn half. Each returns to the starting partner to courtesy turn to face the center of the set or to follow the next call. And, for example, I was only ever exposed to following the next call. So, and I would say that this square dancing is a language that we've developed between callers and dancers to communicate. And there kind of is no hard and fast rule, but over the years, it seems that people use certain calls certain ways. And then, like Bob Osgood started codifying things with his sets and order booklets, which many of us may have learned with. I certainly did. There's the Burleson Encyclopedia was an attempt to write down how things were done. So the next one I see here is again, I think the EC had asked this one, is there a call named left scoot back? And the audience is shouting no. And the reason presumably is we don't need to say left. And you might say left to help people as a helping word, but it's not part of the call name. You might say things like boys go, girls go, or something like that. Occasionally people slip up a little bit and say things like boys scoot back, meaning scoot back, the boys go. And if the dancers kind of know what you mean, I guess that's okay, but it's technically not great because it's a little bit like you're asking just the boys to do the call. If we were in right-hand ocean waves with boys in the middle, and you said boys scoot back, that would mean the boys in the middle do the scoot back action, which actually would happen to be left. Another one I saw in here is, and these are, I went through a whole bunch of questions and emails that I get asked, so I just figured I'd throw some of these out. We have a call Dixie style or Dixie style to a wave. Is there a left Dixie style or something like that? What if you want that other action? Okay, so I'm hearing murmurings like reverse Dixie style to a wave. What do you think? Do you use reverse Dixie style to a wave?
No, I don't believe that. I believe the reverse Dixie style would be with the other. We do a Dixie style, the right hand dancer.
Correct.
A reverse Dixie style would be the left hand dancer.
Yeah, and I
with
think
the left hand, but I'm not sure that I would call that a reverse Dixie style in my estimation. That's just my opinion.
Can we get 4 dancers up in the middle for 1 sec and facing couples? I don't know if we care about the genders, but it looks like we have 2 ladies and 2 guys.
Now, this would be something that would not be at the top of the list of your standard applications review. This would be something that would be down on the bottom of the list.
So just to make sure the first one works, right and left through. Dixie style to a wave. So that seemed to work. Boys run. Ooh. Bend the line. Dixie style to a wave. Well, they did it with both boys or girls going in, so that was good. Girls cross run. Boys run. So you guys want me to call it reverse Dixie style, right? Bend the line, reverse Dixie style. Boy lead left, give a girl a right, and we now have a right-hand wave with girls in the middle. I happen to like and believe that it should be called reverse Dixie style. And I think we might have had a emphasis call or a quarterly selection a while ago. I think it might have just been called reverse the Dixie or something like that, as I remember.
It's been several years.
Yeah. So the question is, there's many examples where we have the other flow, like we have flutter wheel and we have reverse flutter wheel. And for almost all of our calls, if there's a right-hand version, there's a left-hand version. If there's a clockwise version, there's a counterclockwise. We have promenade, we have wrong way promenade, for example. And one of the questions is just, what do you call the one that goes the other way? And I think generally here, the Dixie style one's been called reverse Dixie style. Here we have a question.
Not a question, a statement. Mike Turner from Kansas. I believe about 20 years ago, they actually were calling that Yankee style to an ocean wave, which was the opposite of Dixie style.
Fascinating. I've actually never heard that, but...
And, you know, it happened to be a traveling caller that was coming through our area. Now whether it was, he had actually submitted it or not, I'm not sure.
Make note that Randy Doherty is falling off his chair laughing. Somebody else have a question over here?
My name is Ingeborg Körber-Lücker. I'm from Germany, and I have a question. I had a big discussion with a C-level caller exactly about this reverse Dixie style, because I used to call that. And he said to me that it's not allowed to use reverse Dixie style in the mainstream level because reverse is a concept in C-level. So do you agree to that, or would you use reverse Dixie style in a mainstream?
Lanny's going to answer that initially.
No. You passed me a long time ago.
Well, this is another question that comes up a lot. And frankly, I'm not the mainstream chairman or the mainstream committee, so let me offer you just my opinion. If you take a strict interpretation of the mainstream list or dance program, certainly all the words and calls that are on that list, we should be teaching our dancers and they should be able to dance, and that's all there is. So we have veer right and veer left, but yet we only have lead to the right. And as Al Stevens is fond of saying, if you teach your dancers conceptually, if they can do a lead to the right, they can certainly do a lead to the left. And you wouldn't be doing that early on, but with experienced dancers, they should be able to do that. So lead to the left would be stepping into that area that's not currently on the list. And the mainstream committee must have had a reason for having veer right and veer left and lead right, but yet not lead left. And so I think you're going on slightly shaky ground. I certainly see callers do it, and I personally don't think there's anything wrong, but you've got to know your audience and know what you're doing. That gets into all the entire whole right, left, or reverse and normal, or wrong way, right way issue. Because for virtually every one of our calls, left square through is on our list. Flutter wheels there, reverse flutter wheels there. We do ladies chain all the time. We don't have like a men chain or something. We could roll away with a half sachet and have the men do your part of a ladies chain, maybe. You could even just have the men use a left hand and do a men's chain and the ladies reverse courtesy turn them. But that's getting into pretty esoteric stuff. So I think there's a continuum, and I don't think there's a fixed answer. She has another rebuttal, I think, for that.
It's Ingeborg Körber-Lücker again. I just saw that you called roll away with a half sachet.
Yep,
Do you know where that ends?
Well, first off, the call, we've been requested not to call it roll away with a half sachet because that confuses dancers who are just calling half sachet. I should have just said roll away.
Thank you.
Correct. I'm an old caller, and old habits die hard.
I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, yeah, Doug Davis, Colbert, Washington. The example you gave is illegal at mainstream because a courtesy turn is illegal at mainstream.
The ladies' chains example and the men chaining.
Yes.
Very good. Just to remind everyone, the mainstream program has restricted all courtesy turns to be a boy turning a girl. Now, that, as long as we're there.
Randy Doherty, Mesa, Arizona. I'm not sure Clark
Randy?
answered your question about, because you call reverse Dixie style at mainstream, should it be called, or is it illegal to be called? Improper. Just because you can do it, maybe doesn't mean that you should do it. If that is logical, then reverse circle to a line. There's all kinds of reverse single circle to a wave, reverse track 2, reverse this. Pretty soon you don't know if they're supposed to be wrong way track 2, wrong way Dixie style. So you really have to have a judgment call on it. If it was a workshop type thing, you wanted to show them that there was the other reaction to it, then it might be a real great tool in your toolbox. But trying to get people to understand why we use the word left when we should be using the word left and when to use the word reverse, to me, it's cut and dried. Reverse means it's a different direction. Either if it's a normal call going clock, reverse is counterclock. Left means either shoulder passing or starting with left or something to that effect. So it's a good workshop tool in your box of tools, but I don't think I would call that a mainstream dance unless it was a workshop tip or something like that. I don't think it's legit.
I wanted to say something since the issue of courtesy turn came up. There's kind of a rule of unintended consequences where you try to force or do something and something else that you never expected happens from that. And I think the mainstream committee restriction on courtesy turn being a boy turning a girl, here's an example of that. Let's say I have lines facing boy, boy, girl, girl. Can I call right and left through? And you would, at mainstream, and you would say no, because if everyone right pulled by and courtesy turned, we'd have 2 boys turning and 2 girls turning. But since all of square dancing is kind of do your part, or those who are in a position to do it should do their part, maybe from lines facing, if I say right and left through at mainstream, the dancers should know that the centers have to right pull by and courtesy turn because it is only they who can do it according to the rules.
Once again, Randy's falling out of his chair. We know CPR, we just choose not to use it.
I am not proposing that, but I have certainly heard that on the mailing list, and that's kind of a problem. I mean, for someone who's doing a strict interpretation of our definitions, why are they not right? We know we don't want that. We know that's not good for square dancing. That wasn't the intent of the restriction, and yet there's an example of taking a little, well, only at mainstream, only this, and suddenly look where somebody's mind took it.
Stephen Cole from Seattle area, Washington. I've been trying to figure out how to phrase this question, but a lot of it comes back down to what is the action of the Dixie style? If the Dixie style is a right to a left, and we call a reverse, or thinking a reverse, and it's a left to a right, doesn't that kind of violate the idea of the Dixie style? I mean, it's kind of funny to hear the Yankee style thing where, hey, it's now the opposite hand. But I mean, if Dixie style comes from Dixie things that came around before I was born, then maybe, I'm hoping anyway, then maybe there's some other issue behind that we should keep track of. Now, I don't know that we should form up a whole new set of, well, Yankee styles or different definitions for it, but I think maybe we should keep some of the original gestalt of the calls kind of intact, and I think that's important.
I guess this is Lanny Weaklend. I intend to agree with you. Some of these calls we're doing, that we're looking at, are not calls that we would put on the standard applications list. Some of these calls would be they'd be in the extended applications. I mean, if you go to a dance, if you don't know your dancers, and you go in and you call reverse Dixie style to an ocean wave, your floor is going to go, it's not going to work. These calls we're looking at, these are common sense. If you're a square dance caller, you got to have some common sense to know your dancers. If you're a traveling caller, Randy's not going to go in there and call a reverse wrap around triple scoot back in this because he doesn't know the dancers yet. Now, he made the third tip. He does that? But you have to use common sense and judgment. These are good workshop stuff. This is great workshop material, but you've got to remember you can only use so much at a dance. You can't go in and call this stuff every tip.
Dan Hopper from Gillette, Wyoming. What if you do a Dixie style to a wave, you're in a left-hand wave, and just call a swing through? I mean, that means half by the right and half by the left.
Correct.
But should you call that, like you walk in and call that to a crowd that you don't know? Huh? Yeah.
So Randy's shouting across the room. The question is, should you call something like Dixie style to an ocean wave, swing through, which would have to start with the right hand in the middle, just at a dance if you just walked in and were calling a dance? And the comment was, if you want stuff thrown at you. So I think one thing CALLERLAB learned a long time ago is it seemed impossible to legislate good caller judgment. And when the lists were made up, there were questions of, should the lists also have all the different restrictions on where you can call calls from or not? And in general, the answer was no. Just give us the definition, we'll figure out where the calls work from. But then the standard application document came out, so that's a good thing. If it's on the standard application document, we believe that, 95, almost 100% of any floor should be able to do these calls from these applications.
Randy Doherty, Mesa, Arizona again. If you were going into a hall and you were calling for the club and you called that cold without saying anything, you know you're going to lose the floor. You got to know that in the back of your head. It's like going in there and saying head star through and now say the center zoom, and you know technically they're supposed to be doing a what? A pass through, because they're all trailers. You have isolated the box. So you're not going to call that and expect them to pass through and then sit up there on the front and say, ha ha. Do a right and left through with the outside too, and everybody else has done the normal zoom action. It's like saying heads walk and dodge. What are the dancers supposed to figure out? You know what's going to happen, don't you? Head boy's going to walk and the head girl's going to dodge. Is that right? No, they're all trailers. So it's a pass through there. You don't call that kind of a thing. So it's all coming down to judgment again. One other thing, tonight I'm calling a tip that is called last square standing. That's the kind of stuff that's going to happen tonight. So I'm not trying to threaten you or warn you. I'm warning you, all right?
Yeah, Doug Davis, Washington again. Just expand a little bit on what Randy said. If you're going to do something like that, Dixie style to a wave and swing through, you might want to lead into it and do a Dixie style to a wave, the boys trade, and do something back to it again. Dixie style to a wave, and do that a couple of times, and then Dixie style to a wave, boys start, swing through, girls when you meet stop, or something like that, and lead them through it. Don't do it cold.
Can we steer back to definitions instead of applications and judgment?
Okay. Well, I have a list. I'm happy to move on to the next item on my list. Can you do couples hinge from lines back to back? So, heads lead right, circle up 4, break out, got a line, up the middle and back, pass through, couples hinge. And I think do you want to get Andy for a comment on that one?
I was just back here.
Wasn't partner hinge from same-facing partners dropped?
Right, and so he raises a good point. Let's think about hinges for a sec. And can I have just a line of 4 up front for a second, standing up, just so I can demo it? Thank you. Let's start with the 2 of you who are here. Okay, so here we have 2 people. Yeah, I know, you guys move away for a sec. So let me talk about hinges. These used to all be together and all be a consistent family, and for better or worse, we've split them up a little bit. So first off, we have trades, so partner trade. And I could also just call that trade or everybody trade. Yeah. Our definition of hinge says that hinge is half a trade. So everybody do a hinge, i.e. half a trade. And now they have a right-hand mini-wave. We also have the word single hinge. So from here I could say everybody hinge, and they'd go a quarter turn by the right in this case. Do a single hinge. And you might wonder, why do we have single hinge and why do we have hinge? We'll get there in a second. And have the leaders you turn back? Well, just somebody you turn back, just so we have a couple again. Yeah. Yeah, now they're in facing couples. A pass-through, you can play with each other now. So we used to have a call partner hinge, and it's still on some dance program, and it's done from a couple, and again, it's half a trade. Do a partner hinge. Do a single hinge. Walk and dodge. Partner hinge. Okay. So what's the point of all that? At the mainstream program, the only two calls we list are single hinge and couples hinge. And we used to have partner hinge, but we dropped it. Have everyone looking at me turn around. So the question now is, what do we have for, I said we had couples trade. Can we call couples trade from here? Certainly, couples trade. Although I heard in a different session it's not used very often. If a hinge is half a trade, then a couples hinge is half a couples trade, couples hinge. But they're kind of doing the same version of that. We dropped partner hinge. Maybe we meant to drop, or we didn't say, or it doesn't, we don't have the whole family anymore. My personal belief would be that that is just fine. Do another couples hinge. Maybe we want to have other people say something on the mic.
Is Randy Doherty, Mesa, Arizona, is there such a thing as couples left trade or left couples trade?
Wheel and deal. First couple go right, next couple go left. Left wheel and deal. Put the other couple in front. First couple go left, next couple go right. There's a choreographer in every group. So I think the left wheel and deal thing could work, and that's what I've heard it called. But your question was not for left wheel and deal, but for couples trade. Do a couples trade. Do a left couples trade, or couples trade passing left shoulder. I haven't heard that called. I would kind of know what the caller meant, especially if you add some extra helper words. Normally it didn't matter, like you just ended up in the same place, so who cares? So why would it get called? That's probably why some of these things don't get called. Are there any other comments on the hinge and trade issue?
Personally, I miss partner hinge. I wish.
How many people in the room miss partner hinge? There's a reasonable number, half maybe.
Andy Shore from Fort Lauderdale. But I think that since we don't have it, we don't have same-facing partner or couple hinge either. I think it's not
right. So
not a valid application at mainstream.
Okay, Lanny.
Oh, I agree. At mainstream, I don't think some of these things we're doing would be legal. You take this to the improper.
Just so for people who aren't aware of the history, we used to say things were legal and illegal, but someone said that legal and illegal is just a law term, and like you go to jail when it's illegal. So we needed to pick better words, so we picked proper and improper, which isn't the best, but it's what we have.
Stephen Cole from Washington. I have a question about the definition. It says, I think, any dancers that can trade can hinge. So if you have ends of a line that can trade, can they hinge? And I actually was posed to me by an engineer type, and I was like, I don't know. I guess I wouldn't, but that was the application that was asked of me, and I was wondering if anybody had a comment.
I have a comment. So one of the big differences between hinges and trades, trade is an interesting call because it can work over a distance. You can have the ends of lines trade. You could have a boy, girl, some sort of line or wave, and ask the girls to trade. They'd be once removed from each other. And so in that sense, trade's a very powerful call. But hinge, we always say just colloquially, hinge is half a trade. So the real quiz is, when is a hinge not half a trade? And the answer, I believe, is when it's over a distance. I don't believe, or I haven't seen callers use like the ends of a line do a hinge. So maybe our definition needs to be tightened up or explained a little better, but that would be my opinion.
And just to follow up, Stephen Cole again, is I actually said I believe the gestalt of the call is that the dancers should be connected for the hinge, and that seemed to be good enough for now.
Gary Dodds, Victoria, BC. Just reading the definition, and I'm starting to think that just because we've dropped the term partner hinge, doesn't mean we can't use it. The definition says any two adjacent couples or dancers, which answers that question, can trade. Who can trade can also hinge. Then it goes on to stipulate couples hinge and single hinge. Well, when I just read that first line, that means if I've got a couple or a couple, I can have them do a partner hinge, because it says two dancers, two adjacent dancers. So I'm wondering whether we still do have that move.
Do you have a response to that, or that's just a comment?
In my mind, and there's not four people out there, but if you do ends from everybody's facing the same direction, ends do that hinge thing. It looks to me like it conforms to a diamond, because they only go halfway.
I don't know if we want to go down this path too far, but could we just get a line of four, like the first four up front stand up and get a line of four? And why don't we have the line of four all looking at the audience? We're talking about having the ends do, we won't say hinge, but let's have the ends do half a trade. Since the ends are walking in an arc and they're passing the same position, they're going to pass right shoulders and stop. They'll have a handhold out there, a right-hand mini-wave, but I don't believe they're going to slip in between the centers or anything. So I don't believe we end up in diamonds. You were thinking something different. You were thinking of a two-face line, so have them go back, and the wonderful dancers up front make a right-hand two-face line. Now, from here, if we had the ends do half a trade, then we do have a diamond, and we have definite centers and definite ends. Okay? Well, the ends who are doing the trade, most people would think they're the same distance. They're like ends of a virtual another line the other way. So that's why it looks like a diamond. I think it's no different than having the centers do half a trade is our common way of getting to diamonds. I want to say, you guys can sit down, thank you. I want to say one more thing on hinge, and then we should move on to another call. Is the call hinge on the mainstream list? That's another question I get asked. I see two calls on the list. I see single hinge, I see couples hinge. Yet I hear callers call hinge. I call hinge. Is that proper or improper? You could say it's just a shorthand of single hinge. Maybe the mainstream list should list hinge in there. I don't know. The revised definitions have a section called command examples, where we give lots of examples of how these calls are actually called, sometimes embedded with other calls around them. And I'm hoping that in the new definitions that'll help answer these kind of questions. I personally feel it's fine to call hinge. There's times when I'll use it. I'll say centers hinge or boys hinge, because saying centers single hinge or boys single hinge is a mouthful. But if I just have everybody and I know they're all active, then I'll use the word single and might just say single hinge. I don't quite know when and why I say one or the other, but it just seems some things flow out of my mouth. I don't know. Are there any comments from that? Don Beck, up front
Mike
first.
Turner from Wichita, Kansas again. I think what we really need to get back to is that CALLERLAB was founded for a reason, to standardize. And discussing the Dixie style earlier, if I remember correctly from what old-time callers taught me, was they actually came as shortened forms of a Dixie chain or a Dixie daisy. There were other family calls, likewise with this call. So, and there were calls like couples, hinge, and trade.
Correct.
So, since we're not using those anymore, do the antiquated forms still exist. You have to ask yourself that question.
Don Beck, Massachusetts. Clark, I guess I agree with you. I wouldn't want to call centers single hinge, and I've always used, and again, not by definition, but by gestalt of the thing, single is to help define who's supposed to do it if it's not obvious some other way. And if I say centers, it's obvious that it's only those people that can do the hinge. Whereas if I have waves, I have to define whether it's the centers or the ends and the adjacent centers and the adjacent ends, and that's calling it single that way.
Can we move on? Lanny, do you have any particular call you want to hit on? Or
No, I think the next one is one that you see at dances. You see this all the time.
This is the tag the line and the extend stuff?
No, I'm looking at the one next to it. Go on. That's fine. Go ahead and take that. I was looking at the walk around. Or did I miss that? Where did I see that?
I'm not sure which one you're looking at.
Well, my eyes aren't focusing this morning. I was up too late.
While you're looking, let me do the tags, because I think
go
these
ahead.
are important. I need a line of 4. Doesn't matter what the genders are. And I'm not saying that our definitions are super explicit and good at explaining this, but let me explain it from a more general point of view, and then we can talk about what we think the definitions say. I want to talk about tag the line, and I want to go through all the tags the line. So let's start with tag the line nothing or 0. You would all face the center of the line of 4. If we had tagged the line a quarter, everyone would have walked forward like 1/2 step or a step. We'd be in a quarter tag. I would call this a single quarter tag because there's only one of them, but usually we have the whole square here and we'd be in a quarter tag. I personally think that we have the center 2 holding right hands in a mini wave, and the other 2, if we just had these 4 dancers here, would be lined up right down the middle, not behind that guy's back. No, not behind the guy's back, down the middle. If we were instead had called half tag, they would go a little further forward and they'd be in a nice right-hand box. If the call had been 3/4 tag, they would have gone a little more and they'd be in a 3/4 tag, and I believe there's a little breathing or adjusting, and the dancers on the outside are lined up on the center line if we were, perfect computers or something. And if we had called tag the line all the way through, then we would be in a single completed double pass through, and look at how the center 2 dancers adjusted, and they were exactly back to back in the middle. So we've gone through all the different tagging positions. You guys can all face right. Now, that's all the tag the lines. Whether that outside dancer is lined up on the center or off by half a position behind a back, or when we're in an 8-dancer quarter tag, are they a couple on the outside or all that, we want to defer that kind of precise stuff just for a minute. I want to talk about extend the tag, or extend. It used to be called extend the tag in the old days. I think it's on our list now as extend, and in the new definitions it'll say something like extend, or can also be called extend the tag. And we're talking for the moment as if those 2 words mean the same thing. So tag the line 0 just means face the center, and most people wouldn't call that, but just for understanding purposes. Extend means to go to the next tag position. So if we were here in the call where extend, they would go from a 0 tag to a quarter tag. And notice that George moved, which is good, because it isn't just that the center's extended or whatever. Everyone moves all the way down tag the line. Everyone moves on an extend the tag. Another extend. Now they're in a half tag position, or in this case, a box of 4. Another extend. Now they're in a single 3/4 tag. Another extend. Now they're all the way through in a completed tag. So if I could explain all that to my dancers and callers and draw those pictures in the definition diagrams, and assuming everyone agrees with that, then that could be a consistent understanding of all the tag the lines and all the extends. But we don't have that. You guys are done. Thank you for the moment. What we do have is tag the line and half tag, I believe, are on the mainstream program. Extend from a quarter tag to a half tag is on the mainstream program. Extend, all the other extends are on the plus program. And presumably, we don't ever say where all the other tag, three-quarter tag is explicitly on the plus program. So we never say where the quarter tag, the line call is, because it's not very danceable, so it's not really an issue. Extend is also sometimes used as meaning step forward, and not necessarily going from one tagging position to the next. So I've heard, in fact, at the convention, we were in ocean waves, and a caller wanted the dancers to step through to end up in a trade buy position. And the call was going to be step through and trade buy. But instead he said, extend and trade buy. So to me, the extend as a dancer, I would have gone to the three-quarter tag, whereas he wanted just take a little step forward. And there are other places where, like from a tidal wave, I've heard callers say extend. And I would prefer step through, but if I extend from there, everyone's going to step through, everyone's going to do the right thing. But if you said what tagging position you're going from, it's a little harder to say. You could say you were going from a partner tag to a partner half tag position to a complete partner tag position, but that's stretching it a bit. Is there anyone who wants to make comments on extend or tag the line or anything I've said?
When we do an extend from parallel wave.
Your name, sir?
Oh, John Geen. I'm from San Angelo, Texas. Sorry, this is what name, serial number,
Yep.
rank. Yeah, okay. Anyway, when we're doing extend from parallel waves, I always tell my dancer, and this isn't in accordance with definitions, I understand. You extend from a given formation to a like formation. If you're extending from a left-handed wave, you extend to a left-handed wave. If you're extended from a right-handed wave, you extend to a right-handed wave. Well, what about the two that are looking out? Extending only puts you farther away from those people in the center. Therefore, if you're not extending to something, should we be extending at all? And going back to what you said a few seconds ago, the person that says that in the center, we're in a quarter tag, and he says extend, I would immediately expect him to go from a given formation, which is a wave, to a like formation, which is another wave. And I'll grant you, too, that an extend can be modified, like extend to a two-faced line, extend to, if you had like a two-faced line in the center, and you called an extend, would they automatically go to a two-faced line? I think that's something I'd have to think about. But anyway, I really do feel that extend should incorporate some verbiage in there that says we extend from a given formation to a like formation if it's possible, and if you're not extending to something, there is no need to extend. Hence the step through that you talked about, I think would start to take on a little more weight. Thank you.
Let's keep going on the discussion. You raised three good points I want to address in a minute.
George Edwards, Michigan. My feeling on extend is that everybody moves one half a position forward. And if come to us, two people that come to the same spot join to a right-handed wave, unless they're starting from a left-handed wave otherwise.
I need to make one comment there for a second. In all the extends that we did, no one ever, I only did a right-handed one, but the same thing would have happened had we all been left-handed. We never had an issue in the extends that I was showing where two dancers came to the same spot and grabbed right hands. So no one had right hands because of the same spot, same position rule on that. That's only peripheral to what George just said. He is making a different point, but I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
Ingeborg Kabalika from Germany. I agree with this, that you should extend to something in mainstream. But further on, what about extend from a column?
That's probably worth answering right now. So let's say we're in right-hand columns, and the call is extend. What's the ending formation? And this gets into a question of, do people believe that calls have certain sizes or number of dancers it takes to do things? Are some calls 2-dancer calls or 4-dancer calls, or do they take 8 dancers? I think right and left through is a 4-dancer call. Star through is a 2-dancer call. Peel off, generally I'd answer it's a 4-dancer call, but there's times when it's only a two-dancer call, plus you need to know where the center of your set is. So I could ask the points of diamonds to do a peel-off. In the case of extend, from the demo that we did, I believe extend is a four-dancer call. And if we were in columns and said extend, each group of four, working separately and independently of each other, would go from a half-tag position to a three-quarter tag position, plus the little breathing or adjustment for the new lonesome dancers, and there should be the original number 3 dancers in the column should be nose to nose in the center of the set. Now, will Randy's dancers do that? Oh, Randy doesn't even agree with me, let alone will his dancers. So the answer would be no, his dancers will do it. I think most dancers would take half a step forward, and you'd have a column of 6 in the middle and 2 dancers on the outside. So let's keep discussing extend, but we're going to have to come back to that.
Alan Hirsch from Westcliff, Colorado. The same problem arises with crossfire from out-facing lines. What do the centers do on the extend? Do they step to a wave or just step through?
Okay. Do you want me to answer that now? As long as we have that question on the floor, but we're getting a little far afield, but you're right, it has the extend on it. That issue comes up in the definition committee occasionally, and many callers are divided on where crossfire from lines back to back should end. And since I mentioned how many dancers does it take to do a call, some callers strongly believe that crossfire is a 4-dancer call. So done from a one-face line, it ends in a couple following a couple, and whether we do it from lines facing, lines back to back, 4 in a tidal wave going, or tidal line going one way, it just does that transformation. Others believe that the way the words of the call were originally written, it ended with a step forward and join hands with dancers if you can, or something like that. It actually does not say the word extend in the end of the definition, if I remember correctly. And we've taken a vote to change the definition, and that vote was defeated in the definition committee. So crossfire from lines back to back still ends in a quarter tag. Even though not everyone agrees with that, the majority believes that. So that should clear up that one. Now we're back on just the extend stuff that we were doing. We're going to, yep.
Don Rouse again from Denver. When you do the crossfire from a two-face line, and I think you just answered that. It doesn't say, of course, I don't have the definition ahead of me, but it just says step forward then, rather than extend. But I've heard callers say extend for teaching purposes.
Our definition of crossfire says, ignoring the starting formation, as the centers begin to trade, the ends cross-fold. Upon completing their trade, the centers release hands and step straight forward, forming an ocean wave or mini wave with the dancer they are facing. If the trade leaves the original centers facing no one, they step forward and remain facing out. So it was carefully written not to use the word extend, even though that's commonly used for teaching. And I guess at this point I need to make one of my 3 points I was going to respond to on you. And this is in the handout. The words best used while teaching a call can be different from those used to formally define the call. In his example, a right and left through could be defined as a 2-part call, right pull by and courtesy turn. Teaching it, you may simply say right pull by, now courtesy turn. That may not have the best success rate. You may want to point out that each guy has a girl beside them, that this is the one that he or she will courtesy turn, and now I'll shake right hands, pull by or walk by, let go, boys courtesy turn the girl beside you. Or I use scoop the girl around. That seems to work. But there may be a lot of different words in teaching. When I heard Jerry Junk in a teaching session teach tag the line, he said all face the center of the line. I forget if he said something about the offset thing. And he said for each tag number, I want you to take, it might have been 1 step forward. And I'm thinking, what is he talking about? And sure enough, that distance just worked, and the teach was the slickest thing. The definition's not going to be written that way, but his teach is probably easier and better than using the words of the definition. So I'm happy to have people teach in words that aren't exactly the definition, or maybe even very different from the definition, if it gets the dancers walking the right path and not thinking something that's too far afield. There's certainly times when you teach things, it's pretty risky, that you know are kind of wrong. For example, teaching scoot back and follow your neighbor, I like to have all the dancers dance the same dance action where you have the leaders think of working with a ghost or a phantom or a pretend dancer. So on Scoot Back, everyone take a step forward, everyone trade, some of them with a pretend dancer, everyone take a step forward. They're all learning and doing the same action. That makes it easier. Follow your neighbor, the same thing. Everyone walk forward and arm turn, sometimes with a pretend dancer for 3/4. So that's pretty good. You might like that. It might work. Where does it not meet the definition? It doesn't work for scoot back and roll. Scoot back and roll, the leaders, the dancers looking out, they're just running over. They can roll. If they're working with my pretend dancer, walking forward, trading and walking forward, then they couldn't roll. So there's an example of a teach that doesn't exactly work in all cases, but it gets them going on. And sometimes scoot back can be a particularly difficult call for new dancers. So I'm still happy using that, but later I have to tell them, by the way, these people can roll. Okay, so I covered a little bit the difference between teaching words and the definition words. And in the definition business, many people who don't like the definitions or what we have written are thinking of their teaching words. We're back on extend.
Randy Doherty, Mesa, Arizona. Clark, I'd like to have you respond to a couple of formations for me. First of all, when I'm teaching extend the tag, I purposely make sure that the people understand what center up means. And there's nothing in our definition that talks about centering up your formation. And so I'd like to see you have 8 dancers with a grand tidal two-face line and then a two-face line that is tidaled, and try to explain the difference.
Does anyone understand what he said? Okay, so can we get 8 dancers and make a grand two-face line? That would be 4 dancers facing one way and 4 dancers facing the other way. We have 3 going one way and 2 going the other way. And we're getting there. We got 3 and 3. We got 4 and 3.
Need one more.
Here comes Alan.
Here comes.
So here we have a tidal formation with 4 dancers going one way and 4 dancers going the other way. We have right hands join the middle. What do we want to do from here? The question is call extend the tag from here. I wouldn't call extend the tag from here.
Pardon?
I would not call extend the tag from here.
You would not. You would call what, step ahead?
I wouldn't call even step ahead. If we had a tidal wave, can the appropriate dancers turn around so we have a right hand tidal wave?
That'd be you, Mike. You'd be Mike, right hand.
Very good. From here, I would prefer to call step through to get them into a lines back to back. But certainly, if a caller said extend, I know what he means, and I would dance that, and so would all the dancers. That's
okay? Fine. Can I call now? Grand
yes.
Swing through. Centers run. Of course, you have to know if you're a center.
That would be each side centers run.
All right. So now if I was to call extend the tag from here, my dancers would know to center up, so they'd be back to back.
They would
I could call veer right.
Yeah, they would dance a veer right. Yeah.
Yes. The center 2 couples facing Clark, well, what I need is that tidal two-face line again. So the center 4, would you, partner trade or turn back? Good. All right. There you go. So now if I was calling it, it would be like a 4x4 veer right, because my dancers, if I'm going to use the call extend the tag here, they still know to center up. So this is like, it doesn't matter if it's a quarter tag grand or a 3/4 grand or whatever. It doesn't matter. The outside dancers are not there. So they're going to center up is what my estimation of this call, or how it should be interpreted. If we started teaching it that way, we'd eliminate a lot of our problems, I think.
So how many callers in the room also are using extend the way Randy's talking about right now? So we have 1, and obviously Randy is 2. So this is new to me, and it doesn't meet my gestalt of what extend is, but if a bunch of other people are doing it and believe in it,
well, let me show you why. Do a couples hinge on each side. Now if you say couples extend the tag, or if you just said extend the tag, didn't you say the word couples. And this is where it's being misused at plus and advance, even C1, because now if you say extend the tag, the center couples are meeting a two-face line, but the outside couple needs to center up. And what's happening is callers are intending people just to step forward, because we've said an extend is a step forward, and it's not. It's a step forward and center up, I think, in my mind. And
so unextend?
Unextend, go back
so
where
you're
we
back
were.
to a two-face line. So we're standing here in right-hand two-face lines. And this was also one that you got into that I wanted to comment on. If you take that original demo that I did of the tag the line and the different tagging positions and extend moving you from one to the other, if we call that the strict meaning of extend, then this extend from here, just calling extend, would not be proper, because there's no tag the line that these guys are partway through that we're moving from tagging position to tagging position. This would be properly an as couples extend. But we can't call as couples extend at mainstream or plus because we don't have as couples concept on those dance programs.
Okay, so all 8, would that be proper?
I wouldn't, all 8 doesn't do it either for me. So I kind of don't have good words at mainstream and plus to get the dancers to do the extend and centering up that you're looking for. But yet I know that many places callers are saying extend from here, or, couples extend. If you just said couples extend, that's probably, loosey-goosey enough that it gets it across, and I'd be happy too. I mean, the goal isn't always to make me happy. So, you do what you're doing, and if it's working for you. But when you go other places, you can't just expect the dancers to respond like that.
No, but at a plus and advance and so on, but as soon as you start saying there is no tag extensions of this, there are, because at vertical, there's the 4 that we have. I know that, but what I'm saying is, why don't we make sure that the mainstream callers use it correctly then, is what my point is, Andy.
Well, and a way to do that is to make sure our definitions are clear, and our definitions are kind of only okay in this area because at mainstream we only explain to the callers or define for the callers. Thank you, you guys can sit down, I think. And we're virtually out of time also, so we're eating into your beverage break, but I think we're happy to talk for a minute or two. And we might want to summarize something if one of us can think of something to say at the end. I've lost my train of thought.
That's what happens when you get older. Me summarize. Don, you want one more comment here?
Don Rouse from Denver again. This gets then to teaching the mainstream dancers the proper way of doing things to get them ready for the more advanced calls in the more advanced dancing. That is training them to do it the proper way, so when they get to advance and challenge, they're already prepped for it.
This is Lanny Weaklend. I do not agree with that either. I don't think we need to be teaching our mainstream dancers to dance higher levels. If we teach our dancers the mainstream program the way it is intended to dance, if they intend to go on to the next level, they'll already have the tools if we do the calls the way they should be taught. We don't need to be teaching. Right now, we need to get dancers into the mainstream. Challenge, advance, they'll take care of themselves, and plus. So teach the dancers the way there should be done. Use the tools. Clark has given a lot of stuff here that you can use. Use the calls to your ability, but use judgment. Don't go in and confuse these people with calls that they say, I'll never see that again. Why should I do this? Clark, we got time for one more comment?
Trevor Day from Manchester, England. The one problem that you do have is with square breathing, though, of people adjusting. And that needs to be taught the first time you teach a move on there so that it can keep with the people all the way through. It's very difficult to unteach dancers and reteach them when, if you do it correctly the first time through on there, then they've got that tool in their toolbox. As callers, we know on there, we learnt to call one way on there. It's very difficult to unteach it and relearn a different way on there, so why should we expect the dancers to do the same thing?
Randy's centering up, cowboy up, whatever it is an example of breathing, right? And breathing is not something that's been mentioned in our existing definitions. There is a section on square breathing in the new revised mainstream definitions, but that's pretty far down before it gets approved because it's more at the end. First, you need all the call definitions. I guess my final summary would be, first off, if you thought this session was valuable, put it on your critique sheet. We certainly got through less than a third of the ideas I had, and I added square breathing as something worth talking about. And we could do it again next year or in the future. All of what we talked about today isn't going to get one more dancer into square dancing. It isn't going to make the newest person coming in have more or less fun. So I echo your sentiments, and we can be technicians and all that, and especially when you get into definitions, it always gets technical. And when you have callers who've been calling for a long time, and what can we do with this call and that call, we always get into these discussions. But somehow we have to get back to the dancers are there, they're dancing, they're not stop and going, they're dancing, they're having fun, they're enjoying what they're doing, they're comfortable in the routes and trails they're going through. And as Al Stevens would say, if you teach them conceptually so they get a real good idea or picture of how the whole thing works, then perhaps you can do some of these other things we've been talking about, and it will make sense to them and just work. But we shouldn't make all the stuff we've been talking about be hard work for the dancers, because then it's kind of a job, or it's like being in school again rather than just going to a dance and having fun. So I appreciate all of you being here. And
the only comment I have is one thing that I've always thought as I've been calling. I'm one of the newer callers. I've only been calling for 22 years. But my estimation with dancing is supposed to be fun. The dancers are supposed to win. Always. If you go into a dance and you call a dance and you break down 90% of the floor every tip, they're not going to come back to you. So the dancers are supposed to win. Let them win. Thank you all for coming.